Hello viewers, today we shall be briefly studying the provisions of the FEMA 2000 Act and also the amendments that have happened to the Act. This is pertaining to Unit 6 of the FEMA Act 2000. Before we embark upon a detailed study about the FEMA Act, let us first understand why FEMA had come into being by replacing the FERA Act, that is the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. The Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999, or in short FEMA, has been introduced as a replacement for earlier Foreign Exchange Regulation Act FERA. FEMA came into force on the first day of June 2000. Its features are: firstly, consolidate and amend the law relating to foreign exchange, facilitating external trade and payments, promoting the orderly development and maintenance of foreign exchange market in India, and it is covered in 49 sections in the Act. To summarize, it means that the FEMA had come into being to consolidate and amend the law relating to the foreign exchange. FERA was considered a draconian law and it was opposed to the liberalized scenario post-independence. Thereby, the FERA was scrapped and the FEMA came into being. Let us study the background of the Act. The FEMA replaced FERA, that is the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act 1974. FERA had become incompatible with the pro-liberalization policies of the Government of India. This was done in order to relax the controls on foreign exchange in India as a result of economic liberalization. FEMA served to make transactions for external trade, that is the exports and imports, easier. Transactions involving current account for external trade no longer required RBI's permission. The Foreign Exchange Regulation Act was very stringent, which almost discouraged foreign exchange and foreign exchange transactions. Thereby, it was not competent with the changing scenario and liberalized policies of the Indian government. Thereby, the need was felt to replace FERA with the FEMA, which was more liberalized and in tune with the policies of the Indian government. With this, no longer the Reserve Bank of India's permission were required for current account, and only for the capital account transaction the involvement of Reserve Bank of India was required. Now let us study few definitions relating to the FEMA 2000 Act. Authorized person. It means an authorized dealer, money changer, offshore banking unit or any other person for the time being authorized under subsection 1 of section 10 to deal in foreign exchange or foreign securities. Capital account transaction. It means a transaction which alters the assets or liabilities, including contingent liabilities outside India of persons resident in India, assets or liabilities in India of persons resident outside India, and includes transactions referred to in subsection 3 of section 6. Thereby, an authorized person would mean a person who has been authorized under the Act to deal in the foreign exchange, whether he is called a dealer, a money changer or offshore banking unit or any other person, and a capital account transaction would mean anything by way of which the nature of the assets or liabilities has changed, or it affects the assets of liabilities of a person who is resident outside India. Now let us study the currency definition. It includes all currency notes, postal notes, postal orders, money orders, checks, drafts, traveller's checks, letter of credit, bill of exchange and promissory notes, credit cards or such similar instruments as may be notified by the Reserve Bank. The currency would include any kind of instrument which can be converted into money and is represented by way of letters of credit, bill of exchange, promissory note, postal orders, checks, etc. Currency notes on the other hand would mean and include cash in the form of coins and bank notes. Now, let us study the current account transaction definition, which means a transaction other than a capital account transaction and without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing. Such a transaction would include: number 1, payments due in connection with the foreign trade, other current businesses, services and short-term banking and credit facilities in the ordinary course of business. Secondly, payments due as interest on loans and as net income from investment, remittances for living expenses of parents, spouse and children residing abroad, and expenses in connection with foreign travel, education and medical care of parents, spouse and children. Thereby, it means that all kinds of transient transaction, that is of the nature of current transaction, whether they are earnings on investments by way of interest or they are remittances for the living expenses of family, all shall be included. Foreign exchange. Now, that would mean foreign currency and would include deposits, credits and balances payable in any foreign currency, drafts, traveller's checks, letter of credit or bills of exchange expressed or drawn in Indian currency but payable in any foreign currency, drafts, traveller's checks, letters of credit or bills of exchange drawn by banks, institutions or persons outside India but payable in Indian currency. So, foreign exchange is a broader term and would include all sorts of instruments having the effect of changing the currency of one nation into the currency of another nation. Now, let us study what is a person. Person would include an individual, a Hindu undivided family or HUF, a company, a firm, an association of person or a body of individuals, whether incorporated or not. Every artificial juridical person not falling within any of the preceding subclauses. In the last clause where we have discussed every artificial juridical person, this will be represented by the temple's pandit or a person who is representing any religious institution. He shall be included in the term artificial juridical person. That means he is a person who is representing God in such religious institutions. Now, the person resident in India. Person resident in India means a person residing in India for more than 182 days during the course of preceding financial year. Person resident outside India means a person who is not resident in India. Repatriate to India means bringing into India the realized foreign exchange, which shall be discussed in the next slide. Now, let us know what is a person resident in India. This definition is in line with the income tax definition of person resident in India, whereby the residential status of a person is determined on the basis of his stay in India, that is 182 days in a financial year. Therefore, a person who is resident outside India means a person who does not meet the criteria of 182 days in a financial year. Repatriation would mean selling of such foreign exchange to an authorized person in India in exchange for rupees, or the holding of realized amount in an account with an authorized person in India to the extent notified by the Reserve Bank, and includes use of realized amount for discharge of a debt or liability denominated in foreign exchange, and the expression repatriation shall be construed accordingly. Therefore, when a person visits India and brings foreign exchange and then gets it converted into Indian money, it will be considered as repatriation, and selling of such foreign exchange shall be made by giving it to an authorized person in India. Such an authorized person would be a dealer, a money changer, or a person who is approved to deal in foreign exchange. Now, let us know about the regulation and management of the foreign exchange. Firstly, the dealing in foreign exchange. As per the Act, no person shall deal in or transfer any foreign exchange or foreign security to any person not being an authorized person, make any payment to or for the credit of any person resident outside India in any manner, receive otherwise through an authorized person any payment by order or on behalf of any person resident outside India in any manner. Lastly, enter into any financial transaction in India as consideration for or in association with acquisition or creation or transfer of a right to acquire any asset outside India by any person. Thereby we can conclude that dealing in foreign exchange has to be made in the manner that has been regulated under the Act by only getting the foreign exchange changed into the national currency through the authorized person, and also to see that a person's account is not credited until unless he is a person who is resident in India, and in case the credit is being made, then it should be according to the procedures prescribed. Now, let us study about the current account transactions. Any person may sell or draw foreign exchange to or from an authorized person if such sale or drawal is a current account transaction, provided that the central government may in public interest and in consultation with the Reserve Bank impose such reasonable restrictions for current account transactions as may be prescribed. This means there is not any kind of stringency involved in the current account transaction. A person can sell and draw foreign exchange to or from an authorized person if such a sale or drawal is a current account transaction. Let us study about the capital account transactions, how the regulation shall be made. Subject to certain provisions, any person may sell or draw foreign exchange to or from an authorized person for a capital account transaction. The Reserve Bank may, in consultation with the central government, specify any class or classes of capital account transactions which are permissible, the limit up to which foreign exchange shall be admissible for such transactions, provided that the Reserve Bank shall not impose any restriction on the drawal of foreign exchange for payments due on account of amortization of loans or for depreciation of direct investments in the ordinary course of business. Thereby, there is certain restriction cast on the capital account transaction. The same can be made when they are according to the procedure of the Foreign Exchange Management Act. The drawal of the foreign exchange for payments which are due on account of amortization of loans or for depreciation of direct investments can be allowed if they fall under the ordinary course of the business. The Reserve Bank may by regulations prohibit, restrict or regulate the following: transfer or issue of any foreign security by a person resident in India, transfer or issue of any security by a person who is resident outside India, transfer or issue of any security or foreign security by a branch, office or agency in India of a person resident outside India, any borrowing or lending in rupees in whatever form or by whatever name it is called, any borrowing or lending in rupees in whatever form or whatever name it is called between a person resident in India and a person resident outside India, deposits between persons resident in India and person resident outside India, export, import or holding of currency or currency notes, transfer of immovable property outside India other than a lease exceeding 5 years by a person resident in India, acquisition or transfer of immovable property in India other than a lease not exceeding 5 years by a person resident outside India, giving of a guarantee or surety in respect of any debt, obligation or other liability incurred by a person resident in India and owed to a person resident outside India or by a person who is resident outside India. Therefore, we have known that all the transactions that we have discussed from A to J, all of them are restricted, prohibited and regulated by the Reserve Bank of India in the certain manner. A person resident in India may hold, own, transfer or invest in foreign currency, foreign security or any immovable property situated outside India if such currency, security or property was acquired, held or owned by such person when he was resident outside India or inherited from a person who was resident outside India. Therefore, it means that a person who is resident in India can hold a property which is outside India provided it had been transferred to him by way of inheritance or he had held or owned that property while he was resident outside India, and he can continue to hold that property which is in foreign land. A person who is resident outside India may hold, own, transfer or invest in Indian currency, security or any immovable property situated in India if such currency, security or property was acquired, held or owned by such person when he was resident in India or inherited from a person who was resident in India. Now, this position is exactly the reverse of the position we discussed just a slide before. In this, a person can hold a property in India even though he is a person not resident in India, provided he had acquired that property or earned that money while he was in India. So, after we have explained about the current and the capital transaction, now we discuss the export of goods and services, how the same shall be taking place. For this, every exporter of goods shall furnish to the Reserve Bank or to such other authority a declaration in such form and in such manner as may be specified, containing true and correct material particulars including the amount representing the full export value, or if the full export value of the goods is not ascertainable at the time of export, the value which the exporter, having regard to the prevailing market conditions, expects to receive on the sale of the goods in a market outside India. Now, this is done in order to ensure the correct foreign exchange value of the goods or services that shall be transacted overseas. Second, furnish to the Reserve Bank such other information as may be required by the Reserve Bank for the purpose of ensuring the realization of the export proceeds of such exporter. So, he will be giving a detail regarding the goods and services that he is going to export, and the same shall be given or furnished to the Reserve Bank. Now, let us know to whom the act shall be applicable. The FEMA is applicable to the whole of India. Any branch, office and agency which is situated outside India but is owned or controlled by a person who is resident in India shall be under the net of the FEMA. Broadly speaking, FEMA covers 3 different types of categories and deals differently with them. These categories are person, person resident in India and the person who is resident outside India. A person shall include the following: that is an individual, a Hindu undivided family, a company, a firm, an association of person or a body of individuals, whether they are incorporated or not, every artificial juridical person not falling within any of the preceding subclauses, and any agency, office or branch owned or controlled by such other person. Secondly, a person resident in India would include a person who has been residing in India for more than 182 days in the last financial year. This means if a person has to be assessed as to whether he is a person resident in India for any offence committed in August 2001, then he should be residing in India for more than 182 days during April 2000 to March 2001. That is the financial year following in the year in which the crime or the act was committed. Any person or body corporate registered or incorporated in India, or an office, branch or agency in India owned or controlled by a person resident outside India, or an office, branch or agency outside India owned or controlled by a person resident in India. So, all these body corporates, whether they are registered in India or not, whether they are controlled by a person who is resident in India or outside, or an office, branch or agency outside India which is owned or controlled by a person resident in India, shall be covered under the net of FEMA. The third one is the person resident outside India. Simply putting it, it is a person who is resident outside India, that is, he does not meet the criteria of staying in India in a financial year for more than 182 days. Let us know about the provisions in section 3. The section 3 prohibits dealings in foreign exchange except through an authorized person. Make any payment to or for the credit of any person resident outside India in any manner. Receive otherwise through an authorized person any payment by order or on behalf of any person resident outside India in any manner. Enter into any financial transaction in India for acquisition or creation or transfer of a right to acquire any asset outside India by any person. Therefore, provisions of section 3 will prohibit the dealings of foreign exchange except through an authorized person. They will disallow the credit of any payment being made to a person who is outside India in any manner. Receipts outside India cannot be made otherwise than through an authorized person, and a financial transaction in India for acquisition or creation of any asset outside India by any person shall also be regulated. Let us study the section 4. Section 4 restrains any person resident in India from acquiring, holding, owning, possessing or transferring any foreign exchange, foreign security or any immovable property situated outside India except as specifically provided in the Act. Whereas section 5 deals with the current account transaction, it says any person may sell or draw foreign exchange to or from an authorized person if such sale or drawal is a current account transaction. And section 6 deals with the capital account transaction. This section allows a person to draw or sell foreign exchange from or to an authorized person for a capital account transaction. That means there is a lot of liberalization towards current account transaction, whereas the transactions which are going to affect the assets and liabilities in India, or they are capital account transaction, then the same shall be restricted in the manner and permission for the same from the Reserve Bank of India shall be obtained. In our session today, we had discussed about the reasonableness of having FEMA replacing FERA, the reason and background for having FEMA and the features of FEMA. Secondly, we discussed so many definitions of capital account transaction, current account transaction, person resident in India and a person resident outside India. Also, we covered section 1 to 6 in our study. With this, we conclude our session for today. Thank you.